समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
On the day Narendra Modi won his third term as Prime Minister in June 2024, it was inevitable that this year he would become India's second longest serving Prime Minister in consecutive terms, surpassing Indira Gandhi, who was Prime Minister from 24th of January 1966 to 24th of March 1977. Second longest because Nehru still remains the longest serving Prime Minister in consecutive terms. It also became inevitable then, when Modi was elected the third time, it also became inevitable, therefore, that around this time in 2025, the season of Modi versus Indira comparisons would begin. Reckless though it may be, let me be the first or among the first of the blocks. First of all, we need to look at the larger political realities in which each took over power and the challenges to their authority. Then we will assess their record across four dimensions: politics, strategic and foreign affairs, the economy, and nationalism, in that order. Mrs. Gandhi, we use Mrs. Gandhi only for Indira Gandhi, not for Sonia Gandhi. Mrs. Gandhi and Modi took over in completely different circumstances. Both also had a differential in the political capital that they began with. Mrs. Gandhi had not won an election in 1966. She was a convenient compromise after Lal Bahadur Shastri's sudden death in Tashkent. In fact, the grandees in her party thought, isko laga do, choose her. She was like a child to them. She'll be there and we'll figure out what to do. In any case, we will command power from behind her chair. That didn't happen. That's a different story. Mrs. Gandhi herself did not help her cause by looking overawed in parliament early on and very quiet, and socialist Ram Manohar Lohia dismissed her contemptuously as Gungi Gudiya, or a doll who couldn't speak. She had also inherited a broken economy. The growth rate in 1965 was negative, yes, negative, minus 2.6%. In fact, the triple blow of multiple wars, 1962, then 1965, successive droughts, food shortages, instability, and the deaths of two prime ministers in harness within 19 months. Nehru first on 27th of May 1964 and Shastri now on 11th January 1966. Both deaths happened within 19 months. All of these had combined to weaken India. That's the India that Mrs. Gandhi took over. The picture for Modi in 2014 was the exact opposite. He won a majority, the first in India after 30 years. It was a heady majority, and he was his party's chosen candidate. Also, the most popular mass leader in the country after a very long time. In fact, since Mrs. Gandhi. The economy was averaging a robust 6.5% growth across the preceding 15 years. 15 years. His was a peaceful, planned, predictable electoral transition. The degree of difficulty on his day in power was way lower than Mrs. Gandhi's, just as his political capital was enormously higher. She started with negative political capital. It is also important to underline that Mrs. Gandhi's 11th year wasn't electorally earned, but self-gifted by mauling the constitution in a parliament where she had brute majority. She just extended the term of that parliament by another year. Remember, in that parliament, Congress had 352 seats out of 518. It wasn't a 543 member parliament, 518. Congress party had 352. That is a brute majority. And in any case, the entire opposition was in her jail. In contrast, Modi's third term was earned through a general election, though he fell short of a majority this time. His 11 years have seen no challenge, either within his party or from the opposition. The global situation has also mostly remained stable and favorable. Also, India's comprehensive national power, CNP, has risen. All of this counts until the arrival of Trump 2.0. That has changed things. Now, the comparisons across the four dimensions that we listed. On domestic politics, that's the first. On domestic politics, the first question is who's been the strongest Prime Minister of India? Modi or Indira? The rest don't count in that competition. While Mrs Gandhi redefined her politics in an ideology which is deep pink socialist, first from compulsion and then from preference. Why the compulsion? Give me a minute to explain. In 1969, when Mrs Gandhi split the party and the old guard was left behind in the Congress party and she created a new party, Congress I. She was running a minority government. How could she run a minority government? How would it pass its vote of confidence unless some other party voted for it? That party was CPI, Communist Party of India. CPI, pro-Moscow then, not CPM, only CPI. CPI became vicariously a part of the government, supporting it from outside. They brought in the oxygen for her government by way of numbers. They also brought in the steroid, if I may use that metaphor, by way of ideology. And that was the left ideology. And it was under their influence that she turned even harder towards left. So her ideology was deep pink, first from compulsion, CPI, and then she began to believe in it, particularly after the 1971 election, where her Garibi Hatao slogan won her this humongous majority. Modi, on the other hand, was born, died, and seasoned in his saffron ideology. Mrs. Gandhi's power ebbed and peaked at times, it fell sometimes, peaked sometimes. Modi's has also been constantly high, barring the few months of hard dip after the 240 seats of 2024. Even at 240 by now, one challenge he need not bother about is from within his party. He's done a lot to recover since then, and he's been climbing his way back up, although not exactly to the same level where he was on the eve of the 2024 elections. Now he has to accommodate coalition partners. He also has to call his government a genuine NDA government, not BJP government. It's not as if the party did not have people with ambition, but he's marginalized them all, replaced his state satraps with unknown lightweights. There is always a Yogi exception, let's leave that out, but he's replaced, I'm saying wherever he had state satraps, these were replaced with light heavyweights. Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, these are very good examples. Again in Odisha and Haryana, he's chosen for his chief ministers people who were hardly known until then. That isn't so different from how Mrs. Gandhi operated. On ruthlessness, therefore, they are equally matched. On dealing with the opposition and free speech, the emergency will be a hard act to match, even if somebody, God forbid, wished to do so. On the respect for institutions, the competition is tough, like a dead heat. If I started going into that discussion or that debate, it might need an entire academic research paper or maybe a 3,000-word article. So let's not go there. For convenience, let's limit ourselves to just one institution, the Rashtrapati. With V.B. Giri, Mrs. Gandhi reduced the job into a porcelain president. Porcelain president, a fragile ornamental object expected to do nothing, placed in a shelf like this, objected to do nothing except sign on the dotted line. There was that famous Abu Abraham cartoon during the emergency, which had President then Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad lying in his bathtub, signing one more ordinance and telling the person whose hand it was holding that ordinance, obviously one of his orderlies, that if there are any more ordinances, can they wait until I finish my bath? The fact is that the Modi era presidents have been of a piece with those. Modi rose with the power of a 56-inch chest. Mrs. Gandhi was often described in times innocent of political correctness as the only man in her cabinet. Both lived up to these propositions. With Mrs. Gandhi, we saw another manifestation of power, and political skills went out of power because she used those to help the Janata Party government along in its own self-destruction and came back to power in 1980. That's the reason we look at that period as 1977-84. First, the exercise of power while being in opposition, and then returned to power as Prime Minister. But that period is out of the syllabus in this 11-year comparison. An important question is, who kept India's cohesion better? Mrs Gandhi ruthlessly fought insurgencies in Mizoram and Nagaland. Her troubles on this score came post 1980, and that we are not talking about right now. Modi has made a dramatic improvement in the Kashmir Valley, continued on with normalization in the northeast, but Manipur is an unending failure. A big positive is the near destruction of the Maoists in the east central tribal India. That's a big positive, which dovetails neatly into strategic and foreign affairs, our next point. Mrs. Gandhi's 11 years were across the peak of the Cold War. She signed a treaty with the Soviet Union with a cleverly drafted mutual security clause, endured the Nixon-Kissinger tilt to China, helped along by Pakistan, and deftly navigated the narrow spaces still available to India. Modi started out with a friends with all approach. See, he invited all neighborhood prime ministers to his swearing in. Also, he made that surprise journey break in Pakistan to meet and greet Nawaz Sharif. He tried that friends with all approach. He also invited Xi Jinping to India. So that was the friends with all approach. But Pakistan-China realities soon caught up with personalized diplomacy. Mrs. Gandhi announced India's nuclear status in 1974. That was Pokhran 1, Buddha is smiling. But it took Modi in 2019, Balakot, and then 2025, Pahalgam, to call Pakistan's nuclear bluff. That is to say that there is a nuclear deterrence, of course, but it isn't just one side's deterrence. You cannot keep doing what you want to do under the nuclear umbrella. That bluff he called, that's a big plus in his corner. It's risky, but that's a big plus in his corner. As things soured in the neighborhood, India warmed up to the US and West, and then the complexity of Ukraine arose. This gave rise to multi-alignment, the idea of multi-alignment. The Trump bull has now trampled all over this China shop. Pakistan is playing the US and China as it did in 1971. In fact, for more details on this, check out Katta Clutter episode 1702. And like Mrs. Gandhi then, Modi has to look for alternatives. But then the Soviet Union died long ago. His predicament is tougher than Mrs. Gandhi's in 1971. But India is also enormously stronger now. The economy, the third point. The economy is where we might have expected to see many contrasts between the two, but surprisingly, there are many similarities as well. Modi came to power promising to be the exact opposite of Mrs. Gandhi, asserting that it's no business of the government to be in business. But on many basic instincts, he's emulated her. The larger, if enormously more efficient distributive politics, for example, an abiding commitment to the public sector instead of privatization. Even this year, the budget allocated rupees 5 trillion in fresh investments in PSUs. Compare that with our defense budget, 6.81 trillion. So just the investments budgeted for PSUs is just a bit less, say 20% less than the entire defense budget of India. Modi has brought in some significant reform. Digital payments, GST, and the bankruptcy code, and some more. The banks, PSU banks, have much better health than they did in the past. Many others, from mining to manufacturing and electricity economics, that is, power distribution, are meandering. In his first and second terms, Modi attempted some audacious reform: land acquisition, farm and labor reform laws, lateral entry into civil services, all are given up now. Until Trump came, Modi seemed settled into the 6 to 6.5% growth, which we'd risk calling the Hindutva rate of growth. I will also explain the logic as to why we call it the Hindutva rate of growth. The logic is a politics driven by Hindu identity and polarization would win elections with 6 to 6.5% risk-free. So why risk pressing on the accelerator? The Trump arm twisting now and the resultant free trade agreements have rocked that leisurely cruise. Let's see if this can force fresh reform at gunpoint. I hope it does. That is something I wrote about in a national interest several weeks back. I will share a link with you with the description of this video. And finally, how do we compare the two greatest proponents of employing nationalism in their politics? For Mrs Gandhi, the backdrop was multiple wars between 1962 and 1971. 1962 with China, 1965 first with Pakistan in Kutch, then a full-scale war with Pakistan in the monsoon in September the same year. 1967, the big clash with the Chinese at Nathula, and then 1971, that's the war we know best of all, the Bangladesh Liberation War. India was already a Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan country. The liberation of Bangladesh, Green Revolution, food self-sufficiency, at least food grain self-sufficiency, and non-aligned world's adulation fueled her nationalism. Modi's nationalism is more muscular in military livery. You see him in military uniforms going to so many military installations and speaking there from the stump. So his military nationalism is more muscular in a very military way. He's also promised now that any major act of terror will invite an Indian military response and that India will make no distinction between Pakistani state-controlled terrorists and the Pakistani armed forces. Now, we can't prejudge the consequences of a commitment trap in promising to respond militarily to a terror act, and we leave it to historians to reflect on the outcome of such strategic predictability. Under Modi, a new Hinduized nationalism has emerged. While it has united a critical mass of Hindu population to keep him secure, it has also created divisions. India's adversaries would be tempted to run a dagger through these divisions. We've seen the Pakistanis try that, not just with our Muslims, but also the Sikhs, especially during Operation Sindoor.